welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today I have a very special episode. My buddy Andrew over at Our Last Meal podcast and I decided to do a little feed swap this week. So he will be airing an episode of one of my podcasts and I will be airing one of his. So you should definitely check him out. He's available on all the podcast platforms I can think of, and it's Our Last Meal. And he has conversations with people on their losses and food, because what a greater comfort than a good meal. Am I right? I know, I grew up Methodist. That's how we solved everything with food. So, but food plays a big role in our relationships sometimes. And he just has some of the most beautiful conversations with people on their memories, their joys, their sorrows, and the meals they share therein. So I won't blather on too much here. I have to do my due diligence and mention my Patreon. You can get the link for that in the show notes, but it's patreon.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. You can support me and this podcast so I can keep making amazing episodes for you. And I will be back with a new episode next week, but this week I want you to sit back and enjoy Season 2, Episode 6 of Our Last Meal, where he interviews Paige.
I've talked a lot about using grief to make, do, or accomplish, and I really do believe in that. I've talked to some incredible people who have channeled their grief into ways to help others. But what I realized as I was talking to my guest this week was there's something else that I haven't really touched on. And it's closure. Now, I think the idea of closure is complicated, in that it doesn't really feel as simple as just getting over something or someone or some event. It feels like something that you have to be incredibly mindful about, something you have to acknowledge and claim. Closure is not a matter of moving on, it's more of a matter of making peace. Content warning as always. The show does talk about death, so please be mindful as you listen. Hello and welcome to Our Last Meal. I'm your host Andrew, and my guest this week is photographer and host of the podcast Adventures of a Hot Mess Doing Her Best, Paige. Paige, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. I've been looking forward to talking with you. We were connected by a former guest on the show, Jordan, who you know, and we were talking about how she's really good about just connections, and she just told me, hey, talk to Paige. She's great, and she's got a great story to tell, so I'm glad we get to do this.
Yeah, me too. I love Jordan. She's amazing, so yeah. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So Jordan, if you hear this episode, you've got two big fans over here.
Heck yes.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate you coming on though. I always try to do a little bit of research on folks before they come on the show, just to learn more about their story and about them. And when I first, and this sounds stalkerish, when I first looked at your Instagram, I saw you being very open and vulnerable about loss, and I was just really impressed with that, because it's kind of what I'm trying to do through this podcast as well. So
thanks. Yeah.
I think we'll dive in head first. Who are we going to talk about today?
My mom had passed away 2 years ago, January 13th. So that's kind of who I've been the most open about as far as my loss has gone. So she's a teacher and she was 57. Her passing was pretty quick, so it was kind of sucky for everybody around us, but it's been 2 years and still navigating it in the best way I can.
Yeah, full transparency to the audience. I mean, we're recording this on the 20th, so we're a week after the anniversary, and I just had the anniversary of my grandmother's passing a few weeks ago, and that's only been a year, but it was still tough. How was that for you? I mean, your 2 anniversaries now, how have those proven to be?
The first one was really hard. It also is hard for me which I know a lot of people have told me that they have a similar story to me with timelines. I always grew up loving Christmas and the holidays, and we found out my mom had cancer cells the day before Christmas of 2021. I'm like, what year is it? Of 2021. And then like everything progressed really fast and she passed away 3 weeks later. So like Christmas Eve till like through New Year's is just really like everybody else is like excited and talking about how much they love the holidays. And I'm like, I just really miss my mom.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's hard. And I think that like all of those things just feel like which everybody, like I have a friend whose grandmother passed away around the 4th of July. And it's like the same thing. She's like, everybody gets excited for 4th of July. And I'm just like, these are all the markers of the things that happened before my grandma's passing. And that really sucks. Like, and I think this year, which is the thing that you saw on social media and that Jordan like contacted me about, and she actually asked me if she was comfortable or if I was comfortable passing my information on to you. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Because this year I decided like right after Christmas that I wanted to do 13 days of like things I appreciated about my mom so I could focus on the good things, because I think so often I focus on the sadness, and as much as I was still sad, I just really wanted to focus on like, what are the things I appreciated? What are the things that like people that are in my life don't even know anything about my mom, like, and I think that she was just such an incredible person. And I think that being able to like spread joy about who she was in her life makes people like understand me a little bit better, but understand her a little bit better. And I don't know, it made me feel better, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think if for no other reason than helping you, to grieve and to heal, if it does nothing other than that, it's already beneficial. But I do
Yeah.
think, and we kind of spoke about this, prior to starting, just being honest and sharing your story and what you've been through. I think and there's always a way that it can help somebody else. Even they might not line up perfectly with their story, but just knowing that someone else has been through it or that there could be some kind of similarity, I think that does help
Mhm.
others.
Absolutely. And I would say there was probably between like 35 and 40-ish people, because for a while I was counting them, that were like reaching out to me with, oh my gosh, can I tell you my story? Or I'm like, my mom was a single mom, and like, oh, I like the way that you're talking about my mom. Like, I hope my kids feel that way about me. Or like things like that were like relatable. Like, moms are so underrated. This is, like, and just so many different stories came out of that. And it was cathartic for me. And like, I'm like, if I impacted or like had 35 to 40 people reach out to me that were impacted by my story, like that's so, like, I'm so honored by that. That's amazing
Yeah.
that I could help anybody in any sort of way, and everybody is impacted in different ways. And it just made me really happy that I could bring a little bit of healing or joy or anything into people's lives. So
Yeah. It's this idea of taking something that is inherently sad and just difficult and making it into that positive and something uplifting. I love that. Was there
yeah,
something, or was there someone specifically that influenced you, or motivated you to turn it into this 13 days of appreciation for her, or was it just something that just felt natural?
I think it felt pretty natural. I don't remember if there was like a catalyst necessarily. I just also, I was just feeling really sad around the holidays. And I think that like part of me was like, well, how can I bring joy into this? Like, for myself. And originally I was just going to do it on my personal Instagram, but which I have, like, it's private and I have like 100 followers. Like, it's very, like, very small. And then I was like, my husband actually encouraged me to do it on my business page. He's like, I think that just the internet is full of like, everything's great all the time, and not those real aspects, and like incorporating more like, hey, I had this loss that was really hard. If this is helpful or like inspiring or anything to anybody, then that's great. And I think it also helps people like understand that like I'm a human, and sometimes, like, I had a client when my mom passed away that she waited like 6 weeks or something crazy for her family photos, and I have never in my life taken like that long to deliver a gallery. But she was even like, I took photos of her family this year, and she was like, and I was like, I just can't even thank you enough for your grace in that situation. And she was like, Paige, like, you could have taken twice as long. Your mom died. That's like a crappy situation. And I think that
Yeah.
like sometimes people don't realize that like behind the internet, we're all human beings still. And to me, I'm like, it was kind of like a, hey, just to let you know too, like I'm going through a lot. And so if I'm a little bit slower to respond right now, or this is just a tougher time of year for me. Um, and I have a hard time, like, I don't ever want to make like excuses for things, but I'm also a human being, and I'm not a robot that can just like make it happen when I'm really sad, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it was like
Well,
kind of
it's one of the
multiple aspects.
well, and I'm glad to hear that. But you touched on so many things there that I think make sense. I mean, like one, the idea of like it's toxic positivity. There is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that out there, and I know that phrase is kind of in vogue at the moment, but I, there is a lot of that out there. It's like, oh man, everything's great and the sun's shining, and I'm no. Sometimes things suck, and it's not a bad thing, and it's not, you're not showing a lack of appreciation by saying that. I think it's just acknowledging the reality of the fact that sometimes things just suck. Losing
Yeah.
somebody sucks, and it's
Yeah.
it's it's horrible and it's hard. It's a common thing that we all go through. I mean,
Yeah.
and you talk about the humanness that other people can show in a moment like that. I mean, even the client giving you the grace of, take the time to grieve and to, focus on yourself. That is amazing that, people could be so understanding, because not all people are.
Yeah.
I think at our
And my
root.
first instinct when someone's like that kind, I'm like, what can I give you for free to show my appreciation? But then I'm like, I still have to run a business. Like,
Yeah. No, I mean, and I get that too. I think it's a sign of a giving nature, that somebody shows you the compassion, you just immediately want to put it back on them with something. Uh,
yeah,
but just, I mean, the fact that people can be good and can be decent, we
absolutely.
we have to take moments to appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think that there's like, cause it's like what I was doing on Instagram was 13 days of things I love and appreciate about my mom, or loved and missed, I think.
Yeah.
And I, I'm like, yes, it was positive about my mom, but it's like the underlying thing is my mom died, and now I like love and miss these things about her.
Yeah.
And so like, to me, it was like, kind of like, it was healing for me in a different way of like, one, it challenged me to find things, because I dug out some photo albums that I hadn't looked at in years, and
Yeah.
that she had left with me. And like, so it challenged me to look at things a little bit differently, but like also saying like, I'm sad, but I'm also very grateful for my mom. So like two things can be true. And like, to me, it's like the toxic positivity is like all over the place, but I'm like, you can also be positive, but saying like, that doesn't mean everything's positive.
Exactly.
And I think when you only spread the positive, it like it just makes the people that are having a hard time feel small and feel like they don't matter. And I hate that. Like,
Yeah.
we all like, both things can be true. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that
I
makes sense.
am I'm on record as saying that I don't think any one person or any one situation necessarily is black or white. I think there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
gray in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And in a situation like that, I think about losing family members, friends, things like that. I mean, the negative is there along with the positive. The negative, obviously, is that you've lost them, that they're no longer here. But
Mm-hmm.
that positive that, and I'm assuming I may be projecting, but I guess I'm looking for confirmation too. I mean, it sounds like you had a chance to really just stop and just be in your thoughts with, okay, who was she as a person? What was special about her? You got to actually spend time thinking about that. And that's a great way to try to remember somebody. Is
Yeah.
focusing
And
on
that's how
yours.
I would want to be remembered. I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want people to focus on the things that are sad about me being gone. Because I mean, one day, as much as none of us want to think about that, one day that's the reality, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, like, I would love if people like focused on, like, I told my husband, I'm like, I don't want to have a funeral, just have like a big party where like people tell fun stories or like laugh at me or whatever,
Yeah.
because I don't like, and yeah, there's still sadness. There's going to be sadness regardless, just like there's still sadness when anybody passes. But like, finding the little ways to be happy that they existed in the first place just made it more like healing and cathartic for me.
Yeah. No, and
But
that,
I also am a big proponent of like, do what feels good to you. Like, if you want to talk about being sad, then talk about being sad. Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
No, and I think being it's a matter of being honest. I think that's what you're getting at. Is I
Mhm.
mean, be honest and be truthful to who you are and to how you're feeling. You know,
Absolutely.
and I think that's a net positive in the world. You know, if
I
we
hope
come from a
so.
place of honesty, I mean, you know, it could be somebody that maybe they're not the easiest person to deal with, but if they're coming from a place of honesty, you've at least got common ground then.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will say too, you know, you mentioned you wanted your instead of a funeral, you wanted more of a celebration and a party. I told my wife the other day, like when my time comes, hopefully many decades in the future, um, I want to leave some type of like treasure map. You know, I I'm a
I love that.
well, I'm a silly man in life, and I don't think in death it should be any different. I would love to, you know, send grandchildren, whoever on a wild goose chase, and at the end is just like a note that just says the real treasure was the friendships we made along the way.
Yeah.
Because if I can give them like a 6 month, you know, you got to go across the country and just wild goose chase, and at the end of it, they just say that bastard. That would
Yeah.
be a great way for me to be remembered. I think.
I love that. I also like, I started writing when one of the things like I was, I mean, I don't know. I know that everybody is very upset when someone passes away.
Yeah.
The way that my mom passed away and like the things leading up to it and the things after it, like it was very hard for me and I didn't know like really how to cope. So I started writing letters to her. And I literally, like, I have a sticky note on the notebook that says like letters to mom, burn when I die. But but like I also sat down and wrote letters to like my husband and my best friend and my sister that it's like, hey, like I just need you to know how much you meant to me. So if I pass away, these letters are for them, you know?
Yeah.
And which probably is morbid, but I don't know, like
I,
I'm like I also like I would kill from a letter from my mom that says that. I found actually recently found some poetry that she had written like when I was a baby and there's like poems about my sister and I. And I like got like halfway through one and I was like, I can't finish these right now
oh my god.
because it was probably a week before the anniversary of her death. But I'm like, I feel so fortunate that I have those. And like, I'm not a big writer and I'm not, I don't know. So, but I'm like, if somebody finds these and then they're like, oh my gosh, she like took the time to like write something to me and tell me how much she cared about me. Like, I don't know. I'm like, it's like a closure thing. We don't get closure when people die.
Yeah.
And like, if I can provide a little bit of closure for the people that I love and care about, why would I not do that?
Yeah. I mean, you know, you said that maybe it sounds more. I don't think it sounds morbid. I mean,
Okay, good.
no, and you know, I feel like
Sometimes I'm like, I'm a crazy person, but
no. Look, I've said this 1,000 times. I mean, we all respond to grief and loss differently, and we all have our
Mhm.
way of healing. And I've said multiple times that there's really no right or wrong way. There are healthier ways versus unhealthier ways. And to
Amen.
me, you know, the idea of I want to make sure that there is a legacy of love and care for the people that I care about. That's not a that's a good legacy. That's a thing to be happy about. You know,
Yeah.
and as you said that, you got me thinking about something else. Is I mean, we think about grief for the living, right?
Hmm.
When someone passes, though, I mean, I feel like there is that sense of grief that hangs in the air for them too. I mean, because you know, somebody
Hmm.
they grieve the things that they won't see or they won't have. I mean, you're kind of forced to,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I mean, I think you know, I know personally, I would find comfort if my daughter went through my effects one day and she found something I'd written about her, to her, for her, inspired by her, and it gave her some sense of like closeness. You know, I don't know that I believe in an afterlife, but
Yeah.
whatever energy's floating out there, I do feel like I would find some comfort in that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, I don't know, it like made me, it also, I think, helped me process how I was feeling, like writing a letter to my sister.
Yeah.
And I like, and not, my sister and I are so different, but I think that like there are ways that we've come together, I mean, she's like one of it's like my husband and her, they're my best friends, like, but we just function so differently. And there's things that have come up like through the grief of my mom that it's like, it's united us in like an interesting way. And when you talk about like the things that the people that were dying, like the first thing that I thought of was like how, like, there's also grief from my mom if she, I don't know if I believe in an afterlife either. I've struggled with that, but I, one of the things, my mom was in the hospital, and I think that like a lot of people wouldn't say this, but my mom was a very like open person and said what she felt. And one of the things she said is, it's so silly because I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to quote this correctly if my sister listens to it, but, one of the things she said was that she was like really bummed out. She was never going to see how Dexter ended. And I've never seen Dexter. I didn't know the appeal, but my sister was like, okay, like, and got her iPad and like got it out, and they watched Dexter together in the hospital. So like my mom could experience that. And like, I just remember being like, this is such an amazing moment that like, one, my mom got something that she was like, it was like a kind of a superficial thing, I guess. I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, but like, it's kind of like a silly thing. Like, it's like one of those, like, I don't know, just, it's like you want the closure in this like weird social thing. And the fact that my sister provided that for her, like, made my heart really happy that I'm like, they got to experience this together. And like, my mom got the closure in this situation that she was looking for. Yeah. Like, and I don't know, I'm like, don't we all want closure? Yeah. Like, I have a hard time without getting closure. I'm like, I always want closure.
I mean, you think about it, what's worse than a TV show that you really like getting canceled before they get a proper series finale? I mean,
amen.
I don't think there's anything weird about that at all. I honestly think that was a chance for your sister and your mom to have this moment for something that they could bond over. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if we're staring at our own mortality, who's to say what's the big thing or the little thing in that moment? I mean,
yeah,
I have heard of people, you've heard of people that are, they're on their deathbed and they've got a short amount of time left, and I think I've heard of this like with Star Wars, one of the early news series. I'm not a Star Wars person, it's probably clear.
Yeah.
But back in like the early 2000s or early 2010s, one of the movies was coming out, and I think it was Star Wars, and somebody who was on their deathbed, big fan, they got a screener of the movie before it actually came out in theaters, like a couple months, and they got to see it before they passed. And it's
so cool,
right? And it's a small thing, but it's somebody, their dying wish is like, I just want to see this thing. It's something that means something to me. Big thing, little thing, it doesn't matter. And I get that.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things, like when I listened to a couple of your episodes, one of the things that I was really proud of when my mom passed away was that her last meal was a meal that I brought her.
Yeah.
And like, it made me feel like, and it was before I listened to your podcast, but food was so important to my mom. And I was like, wow, like my sister like got this one closure with her, and I know that my mom enjoyed her last meal, and like I provided that for her. Yeah. And like those little things are things that like I never would have thought would have like impacted me the way that they have, but they really have. Like, it made me so happy that my sister brought that joy to my mom, that she like needed that closure in Dexter. I'm like, one day I'll watch Dexter. I don't know, but I don't get it, but
yeah, it's like,
I'm just like, those closure moments meant more to me than I could even explain. And I don't know, like I've thought a lot about like, how do I make sure that I have those moments? But that's like an impossible thing to like see the future and know, like,
well, I think it's hard,
but
you'll drive yourself crazy, I think, trying to perfect that.
Absolutely.
But taking the steps that you have, writing letters, I mean, I think that's something that's beautiful. But
yeah,
you mentioned it, and I did want to ask you about this. We can kind of transition into the food talk.
Yeah.
You said you brought her.
I feel like I ramble. Sorry.
You've listened to the podcast. You know that I do. So.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So you talk about bringing her last meal. What was the last meal that you brought her? Was it something that she specifically requested? Was it something that meant something to her?
So my mom just really liked food. Like she, anytime, like for her, like her birthday and Mother's Day were the only times that she would like let me buy her food. Cause she was always like, I'm going to treat you to this. Like, I'm the mom. Even I'm like, I'm 30 years old, Mom. Like, I know you're still my mom, but I can buy a meal myself.
Yeah.
but she, like, it was always really important to her. She was always cooking for like friends. We had Sunday night dinners growing up, and like all of our high school friends would come over and she would cook for us. Um, my sister, the day before my sister, or before my mom, no, 2 days before my mom passed away, my sister and we were like at the hospital all day, and she was like, let's go get lunch, basically. And so we went to this place that I had never been to in Spokane, where I live. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got corned beef hash. And my mom had made me corned beef hash like probably a year before that, I think, for the first time.
Yeah.
And I had never had it before at all. So at least not that I remember. But I got it at this restaurant, and I was like, oh my gosh, mom would love this. And Chloe, and my sister's name's Chloe, and she's like, oh my, yeah, she definitely would. And so I was like, why don't I bring this to her for breakfast tomorrow? And so I did. And then like, so how everything happened is like long and drawn out. But, my uncle flew up from Tennessee to see my mom before she passed away. And like my mom, like, she was having a hard time staying awake. And it was very hard, but she like basically like ate this meal and like said goodbye to my uncle, and then like fell asleep and never woke up. And so it was just really like impactful, because one, she was like waiting for my uncle to pass away, and which I've heard that happens, but I didn't really believe it until I was a part of it. And I was like, holy shit, like she literally just waited to see my uncle. Like she waited until he was there. I was like, let me take a picture of the two of you. And then like within an hour, she was asleep and hadn't woken, like didn't wake up after that. And I'm like, and you could tell that she was like waiting. Yeah. And I don't know. It was just, to me, it was even 2 years later, I'm like, is that really how that happened? That's crazy. But it just was like really impactful that like that I knew that she would love this meal, that like she had made it for me a year before, and that like it's a restaurant she'd never heard of and she would have loved to go there. So like usually like once every 6 months or a year, my husband's like, you want to go to brunch there? And then we go there and I get corned beef hash, and we like talk about my mom, and it's really cathartic and nice. But I don't know. So it just made me feel good that I was like able to provide that for her, I guess.
Yeah. No,
Sorry, I think rambling.
No, that's fine. And I think that makes total sense. I mean, because feeding someone, whether you cook it or you buy it, whatever, it doesn't matter. Feeding someone, it is really it's a really intimate thing if you think about it. You talked about your mom making the Sunday dinners when you were growing up. I mean, that is a very intimate expression of love. Love, kindness, just, hospitality, all of that. I mean,
yeah.
So I can understand getting to bring her that, and especially something that you knew she would like, because there's a really cool connection when you just know somebody really well, family, friend, spouse, when you can taste something and say, they would love this.
Mm-hmm.
That's always a really cool thing to me.
Yeah.
So getting to know that, I mean, and I love to, and you kind of answered a question I was going to ask you, that you've been back to that same restaurant, you've ordered the same thing. Kudos to your husband for making sure to do that. And I'm assuming he just kind of knows when it's time. But
yeah, sometimes, or like I'll say like, oh, I'm just really sad about mom today, and then he's like, what can we do? Like, and he very much he is a chef, actually, and so he understands, like, well, one of the like taglines for the restaurant he works in is food is love.
Yeah.
And so he like very much like buys into that. He's like food is where I show my love, I show my comfort. Like, even though he is a chef, like he still like cooks for me all the time. Like sometimes I'm like, you do this at work all day, I don't want you to have to come home and work. And he's like, no, like I want to show you that I love you, and I want to make you things that I know you'll like. And like him and my mom were always talking about food, and I mean, and a lot of other things. But it's just, I think that it was something that like he just knows, like when I am sad about my mom, I like need a good meal. And so, and he knows that like that is always going to be like a comfort place for me because of my mom. And it was like something that I really enjoyed with my sister. And like, we are so different. So when we find something that we both enjoy, I like cling on to that. And I'm like, we have to do all the things that Chloe and I enjoy together.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
I don't know. Yeah.
I really do like that, and I'm glad you still get a chance to go and do that, and it's something you can make a special event. And I'm a big, obviously, I
Yeah.
mean, I made a whole podcast about it. I'm a really big believer in tying a good food, like a food you really like, to a person, and a memory. I think that's really really special.
Yeah.
You talked about her. She loved to feed other people. So tell me more about that, because whenever we were communicating ahead of time, you told me she loved to feed others. How did that impact you and other people? What kind of things did she like to feed people?
She she had a lot of different things that she fed people. She's the only reason I like mushrooms, for the record. So she used to make these stuffed mushrooms that were so good. And my sister is a vegetarian, so she would always like make a separate thing for my sister, which
Yeah.
I just always I've in my adult life I've realized that like some people are not as accommodating when it comes to food. And so like my mom always made sure that people had things that they liked, that they could eat, that they enjoyed. Um, and I always thought that that was really amazing that she would like find those things out. And obviously my sister, like, it was her daughter, but I think that she saw the impacts that like other people being not as accommodating had on my sister. And so she would always like make sure that everybody had what they wanted and needed. She was she grew up in Massachusetts, so she was like a big seafood and lobster person. Like her and her dad used to take, my grandpa had a boat, and they would like go on, I think it was always in Maine, I think. I'm like, I might be messing up some details, but um, they would always like her best childhood memories that she would always tell my sister and I about were her on the boat with her dad.
Yeah.
And so, and then they would always have lobster after. So, like, usually about once a year, my mom would buy lobster, like fresh lobster, and cook it. And she loved that. But it was kind of just like Sunday dinners were just kind of like whatever people wanted or whatever she wanted to make that week.
Yeah.
She had a thing called tater tot casserole that now I make, and I love it. She also, one year for Christmas, which this is like by far one of my favorite gifts I've ever received from anyone. And even before she passed, I felt that way, for the record. But she made my sister and I both recipe books that she like hand wrote like
Oh my
all of her
god.
favorite recipes in. And now it's like literally, it's always been like, as soon as she gave it to me, I was so happy. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. And some of them were my grandma's recipe, and my grandma passed away in 2016. So like having my mom's handwriting and having all of her favorite recipes, it's literally like if my house is on fire, I'm grabbing that recipe book. I'm grabbing my dog in the recipe book. Like,
Well, no, you and your husband, you have to split up. One gets the dog, one gets the book.
yep.
I love that though, and I've got a couple of cookbooks in my office that have belonged to my grandmother, and there's some of her
That's
handwriting. They're
amazing.
like her calling out recipes. These were cookbooks, not that she had written down all the recipes, but just ones that she had and she used. That idea of like having something that she, again, it goes back to like that handwriting.
Hmm.
You have something that she wrote. You have the recipes that she used to feed you. I mean, you can basically take a walk down memory lane just by opening that cookbook and making something.
Absolutely. And she used to make which she wasn't like, she did bake, but not as much. But she used to make this thing called paper bag apple pie.
Yeah.
And it's literally like you cook an apple pie with like the crumblies and stuff in the paper bag. And I don't know why you cook it in the paper bag, but you do. And it is literally, it's like my husband and I's favorite pie. And I probably made like 5 of these pies in the last year because I'm like, I forgot this pie existed. And when I remembered, I was like, I have to eat this pie.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So
I mean, it sounds good. Who doesn't love apple pie?
yeah, I literally will send you the recipe if you want it. It's so good. And I started making it just like because I'm gluten free now. And so
Yeah,
I started making it with like the 1-to-1 gluten free flour. And it literally is just as good. Like, you wouldn't even tell that it was gluten free.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So
So let me ask you this: how many recipes in the book have you gone through? Have you gone through them all? So just some?
I think that I've made probably like, I would say like 5 or 6 probably. Some of them are just things that I'm like, they're not really my things, but they were really she loved them. So,
Yeah.
and then some of them I'm just like, I, I I don't know. I just didn't, I haven't made as many as I probably should have.
No, that's okay.
But
I don't
yeah.
feel like you have. There's like a pressure that you have to go through all of them, and you have to hit them all. I mean, it feels like the kind of thing you could come back to when you need to, just depending on the mood you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I don't know, to me, it's like there's some things that like I'm like, yeah, like I probably wouldn't make stuffed mushrooms. My husband doesn't like mushrooms, like, but like I just like that I have the recipe even if
Yeah,
I don't ever make it, you know?
yeah. I mean, it's like I said, especially handwriting or
Hmm.
handwritten. I mean, it's you can open it up, and she's right there.
Yeah. Which actually, after she gave me that, I there's a recipe called Fourth of July pie that she makes, which is just it's basically like a cheesecake base, and then you put like strawberries, blueberries, and whipped cream. So it's like
Yeah.
red, white, and blue. And it's like one of my favorite recipes. And I made it and brought it to work. And one of my um, coworkers, which he's just a good friend of mine now, but he took some home into his wife, and his wife, which I love and adore which actually his wife is Jordan's best friend. Her name's Leah. Yeah, like it's a small world, but but Leah was like, "Oh my gosh, I love this pie. Can I have the recipe?" So I like went on Amazon and bought a recipe book, and then like wrote out like a few of my mom's or a few of my favorite recipes, and gave her the book. And it was like probably a year after my mom gave me the book that I written, and I'm like, this is probably silly because it's just for like a friend, but I'm like,
Oh,
I don't know. I was like, you deserve these recipes. Spread the recipes. Everybody be happy and eat good food. Like,
I, I,
and then I was at her apartment not that long ago because they live on the other side of the state, and I was just staying there for a couple days. And I was like, I think I was just getting water, and I saw the recipe book, and I was like so excited that she still had it.
I think it's amazing. Like, I really
Yeah.
do. I'm a big fan of sharing recipes and sharing recipes that you care about, and so sharing them with people you care about. So your mom, her recipes she's still living on through her recipes with other people too, because you also never know
Yeah.
who they've shared those recipes with.
Yeah. I honestly, the other day, I was thinking about like, which this is so random because I'm a photographer, but I'm like, I'm going to start posting blogs with my mom's recipes. Like,
That's
why
fine.
would I do that on my photography blog?
Because it's good food.
That's true.
When you do that, please let me know, because I would love to. If,
Okay.
if if you're comfortable with it, I would love to share that recipe out with the listeners.
Heck yeah. I'll send out the link.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So when you think about your mom and food, what else comes to mind?
Um, I think like my mom and food were just always so correlated.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like even like when she would come, she lived 2 hours north of me. And when she would come and like stay the night or visit, it was always like, well, where do you want to go to dinner? Like, what restaurants have you wanted to try that you haven't tried yet? And she would
Yeah.
never let me pay. Like, I literally am like, Mom, I'm not going to suggest these nice restaurants if you won't let me pay. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
and it was actually, she took this photo of me there's this local restaurant called 1989 Public House, and it's like on a golf course. It's very fancy,
Yeah.
like, and I made a reservation on Mother's Day, and which I didn't know at the time it was going to be her last Mother's Day, but I made a reservation, and I was like, you have to let me pay, and then I did, and I like sneakily like went to the bathroom and paid because I knew, because as soon as she saw the prices, she's like, you can't pay this, you can't do that. I'm like, Mom, I literally like budgeted for this. It is Mother's Day, like all the things, and they did this like buffet, and they like had like mimosa buffet too, and she liked a good mimosa, so
Yeah. Who among
um
us?
yeah, exactly. But I'm like, so it's like, and there's this picture she took of my husband and I that day, and it's like hanging in my house, and it's literally because of it's not even a great picture, to be honest. I have so many better pictures of my husband and I, but it's like the memory of like, this was my mom's last Mother's Day. I got to treat her to this meal, and it was like a nice meal that she appreciated. And she took this photo of my husband and I, and it like is all correlated to me. And it just like makes my heart happy every time I look at it, like knowing that my mom was happy that day.
Yeah.
So
See,
I don't know.
no, you're right though. I mean, those are the memories worth keeping. It doesn't matter, like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe it's not the most aesthetic, but it's got the most emotion tied to it. It's got the most positive tied to it. Why would you not want that?
Yeah. And honestly, as soon as I saw that picture when she first took it, I was like, oh, I need to get rid of that shirt. That is not flattering. And I don't have that shirt anymore, but that picture is on my wall.
I don't blame you.
Yeah. So
Paige,
I don't know. I feel like food is like always correlated with my mom. So
yeah. Paige,
yeah.
what else would you like to tell me about your mom? You told me, but
Oh, I
whenever we
don't
were
know.
communicating ahead of time, that she was, I told you it sounded like she was an amazing woman. You've done nothing but prove that right just by talking about her today.
She was. And we had honestly like we didn't always have the easiest relationship, but I think like her willingness and care and wanting to like always improve it was something I just always looked up to. Like, I don't know, her work ethic was crazy. She was an amazing, like, she was a school teacher for years, and she was always like furthering her education and furthering her relationships and like, I don't know, just focused. And she was just such, I don't know, I think it was like the last day that I posted, which I almost posted this picture of my sister, but my sister doesn't like photos. So I didn't. But like my sister, she was just like a badass mom. Like she was a single mom, and she was married for like a couple years in her like early teen years. But besides that, like it was always just the three of us. And like my mom was just, she cared so much about my sister and I, and she was just such an amazing mom. Like even looking back at like the things that I was frustrated about, I'm like, oh, but she, like, I think sometimes it's so easy for us to forget that like our parents are humans
Yes.
and like they're not just our parents. And I think that like it took me too long to realize that about my mom. But now that I have, I'm like, wow, like, yeah, she was grading papers at our soccer games, but that's because of her badass work ethic. And she was still at the soccer games. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And like those things, I think like for years, I spent like years resenting certain things about her that now I just am like, I wish I could like hug her and tell her like, I'm sorry I was so hard on you about these things. You were a badass mom.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I'm sure she knew she was a badass though.
Yeah, I hope so.
I mean, look, I'll say this though, just the way you're talking about her now, I mean, it's clear one how special she was to you, but I mean, just she sounds like she was an amazing lady.
Yeah, she really was. And her
Yeah.
mom, I mean, her mom passed away in 2016, and she had like the last few years of my grandma's life were kind of hard, but
Yeah.
but like my grandma also loved food, and my grandma was also a badass mom. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I hope I'm like a portion of either of these incredible women that are in my life. Like,
I don't
don't
think
know.
I don't think you have a choice. I think you kind of have to be.
I hope so, because they were awesome. And
I
like my
get
sister is also incredible. And I'm like, I'm surrounded by all these incredible women. Like, I don't know. I'm like, I hope that I live up to that, you know?
I think you should. I think there's a lesson here is that you should ask the people around you how awesome you are. Because I'm
Like,
willing to.
please tell me how incredible I am.
No, don't even say it like that. Just tell. I think if you just ask them though, I think you would find out that you're pretty badass yourself.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do have an amazing system, like support system that tells me that I'm amazing all the time. But
So I mean, right there, you already know that you're badass.
It just doesn't, it's like different to like hear it and then like
Yeah.
feel it in your soul, Yeah.
I'm very self-deprecating by nature, so no, I understand.
Yes, I'm like, that is me. I'm like, but it's great that I'm great, but also I could be a little better, like.
Gotta love those perfectionist tendencies.
Absolutely. Yep. Have you ever done the Enneagram?
No.
Oh, okay. It's like a personality test, but I'm a 1, which is a strict perfectionist.
I
Yeah.
don't need to do that. Look, I'm still trying to get used to the ADHD diagnosis. I don't need the perfectionism.
Same, Andrew. Same.
Well, Paige, I just want to tell you, first of all, I appreciate you being on today and talking about your mom. She does sound like an amazing lady. I'm glad I got to learn more about her. But 2 things I always like to ask at the end. So first of all is for those that are interested in learning more about you, your photography work, your podcast, where can they find more information about that?
My photography, well, my website's just paigeo.com, which there's that. And then my Instagram is PaigeOPNW. I am like very human on Instagram. So like sometimes you'll see me dancing and tripping and falling and making a fool of myself, but it's like who I am.
Yeah.
And then my podcast, I promise I will get back to it, is Adventures of a Hot Mess Doing Her Best, which, I mean, you can come on my podcast, Andrew, if you ever want to.
Yeah.
But
I'd be happy to.
it's just random, kind of. It's like it's very ADHD. So
I would thrive there.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, we're all just hot messes doing our best. So yeah.
Well, I'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes. The last thing I want to ask you is if you had an opportunity to have one more meal with your mom, what would you want to have with her?
Oh, my Lanta. That's a hard question that I have thought about because I do listen to your podcast. I was like thinking, because I'm like, well, if it was my choice, but I feel like that would be very selfish, is that I would do corned beef hash.
Okay.
But I think that I would probably like get her like the best fresh lobster possible, because that's what I think she would love the most. And I think like I thought a lot about how like if I could do that, I would be like, we're gonna have some badass lobster, Mom. Like I don't know.
Well, you know what? So in this scenario, because I love asking this question, because I mean I've had answers that are, hey, they relate to what we talked about. I've had answers that are like, hey, that's out of left field. I didn't expect that. But this is a dream scenario where it's any meal you want. So I mean, corned beef hash is one course and fresh lobster is another course. It's totally doable.
Yeah, and I think like I don't know, any meal. I feel like in the last few years of my mom's life, I didn't get to spend, which there's missing context around this, whatever. But I wish I don't think I got enough time to spend with my sister and my mom together. And so I wish like that we could have one meal together. So I feel like there would have to be like a vegetarian component in there too. But
of course.
So I don't know, but something that we could all like sit down and eat together and enjoy together and talk about together. So yeah.
Paige, thank you so much.
What about you with your grandma?
Oh man,
I have to know.
I think the thing I miss the most, honestly, she can make any main dish. I'd cook for her, but I don't, my cooking wouldn't live up to her. But if I could have one more thing that she made, I would love to have the fried cornbread she made. I've never had cornbread better than this, and I don't know that she did anything different to it or special to it, but I would love to have my grandmother's fried cornbread again.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have the recipe?
I don't.
Oh.
It's one of those things I've tried making it before and I've never gotten it quite right.
Yeah.
So one day.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I have faith in you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, Paige, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again to Paige for being my guest this week and for sharing about her mother. She really does sound like an incredible woman, and I'm just glad I got to learn more about her. I'm going to link more information about Paige in the show notes, and I do hope you will seek her out. You can always subscribe to Our Last Meal wherever you listen to podcasts. I ask this every time, but I'll say it again. Please rate and review. Help the show grow. Tell other people about it. Recommend it. Whatever you can, I appreciate. I'd also love if you would follow Our Last Meal on social media at Our Last Meal Pod, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all that. I promise I don't really spam. I try not to. You can also visit ourlastmeal.com, and if you're ever interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can reach out by clicking the Share Your Story button at the top of the page. And until next time, please take care of yourselves. Go share a meal with someone you care about.
Another huge thank you to Andrew for sending that episode over my way for me to share with all of you listeners. So please don't be afraid to go check out his podcast. It's really good. He has such great people on, such great conversations. You might hear some familiar voices in some of his episodes too. I know I've been on there a couple times and I've sent some guests his way and vice versa. So thank you again, Andrew. And to all my listeners here, thank you for tuning in this week. If you need to get in touch with me or if you want to reach out at any time, that's A-OK. You can find me at NikkiTheDeathDoula.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Nikki the Death Doula. And you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. All right, that's it. I'm not going to keep you any longer. Have a wonderful week. And remember, as always, your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck.